Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Good evening. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsey Davis Stover. And today is an incredible day. Today, Virginia became the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Long overdue. Tonight, though, we have a great guest with us, Adelle Settle, who runs Settle Your Debt. And this is an organization that is in Prince William County. Adelle, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your organization and the great work you do for children and families in the Prince William County area.
Sure. So Settle the Debt is a nonprofit. We're a 501c3, and we raise money and we raise awareness to try and ensure that kids get a healthy meal at school, and that if those kids have to incur some lunch debt in order to get those healthy meals, that there's some money on the back end so that we can pay it off if their families are unable.
So how did you first get involved and passionate about this particular issue?
Yeah, in 2017 I was driving home and I was listening to NPR, and there was this story on that just broke my heart. It was there was a story about this little boy, and he was in Arizona, and he went to the lunch line and he got a lunch, and he got all the healthy items that a normal kid would get at lunch. And then he got to the cashier and he didn't have enough money on his account to pay for the lunch. And so the lunch lady took his meal and just took it out of his hands and dumped it in the trash in front of him, and instead gave him a cold cheese sandwich. And it was mortifying for him. He was very sad and he felt terrible, and I just wanted to make sure that we weren't doing similar things to that here in Prince William County.
Wow, what a story. I can't even imagine. Well, tell us a little bit about the organization. I mean, you started in 2017, so it's a relatively young organization, but you've done incredible work in just a few years.
Well, thank you. So yeah, we began as a very casual thing. It was friends of mine on Facebook, and I posted on Facebook that day after I heard that article and was like, what are you doing locally? Like, what does your child experience at school? And I looked for feedback from friends. And they said that, most of them just put money on the accounts, but if there is a debt, that there's a cap on that debt, and that if kids charge more than that debt, then they might get an alternative meal. So first I just thought, well, let's pay off a school or two. Let's see if we can take care of a lunch debt for a couple of schools. So overnight I raised about $1,700 from my friends, and we paid off 3 elementary schools that are just around the corner from my house. But from there, it just grew. We realized that the problem was much larger than those 3 schools that are right around my house. And so we looked into how much the lunch debt was in Prince William County, and were very surprised to hear that it was enormous. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because we have 90,000 kids and 100 schools in Prince William County. It's a lot of children, and they eat a lot of meals.
Sure.
So the problem was just much larger than I had initially realized. So over the course of the last several years, I've I guess we've raised over $100,000 now towards school lunches in Prince William County, and we're just going to keep going. Now we just received 501c3 status last November, just like 2 months ago. So we've been kind of going full steam ahead ever since we received that, so that we can just really ramp up and help as many kids as we can.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, I read in a story that 44% of children in our country actually qualify for free and reduced lunches. That seems like a huge number. Talk a little bit about what that means to us locally here in Virginia.
Sure. So the standard for free and reduced lunch is a national standard. It is based off of the poverty level, whatever that's set at for a given year, and it's 130%, I believe, of the poverty level is what you can earn up to that level for free lunch, to qualify for free lunch. And 185% is what you can earn up to qualify for reduced lunch. So that translates to maybe $35,000 for a family of 4, and then they can qualify for free lunch if they earn under that $35,000. Or they can earn up to maybe $46,000 roughly, and that same family of 4, those kids can qualify for reduced lunch. And that means they're paying maybe 40 cents a meal instead of the full $2.50 or $2.75, whatever it is locally. But those levels are incredibly low, and they're not indexed based on cost of living. So in high cost of living areas, that means that we are missing a lot of families that are struggling.
Right.
So if you want to look at how that impacts our local area, Prince William County, even though we are an incredibly wealthy county, we still have over 40% of kids in Prince William County that are receiving free and reduced lunch.
Wow.
Right, but so that means that their families are earning under those qualification levels. But we also have a lot of families that are earning just over that level, and so they don't qualify for the free and reduced, but they're still not earning enough to qualify to ensure that they can meet the needs of their kids at school. So we've got kind of this gap in between that is just not being met by anyone. And so that's what we try to do. We try to fill that gap so that families who are still struggling but don't qualify for free and reduced, they still have somewhere to go, so that their kids' meal debt gets paid for and their kids get fed.
That's incredible. You know, what is the policy really in Prince William County and surrounding counties? If a child is not able to pay for their lunch, do they get an alternative lunch, or what is the process there to ensure that the story you heard about in Arizona doesn't happen to our children here?
Yeah, so when I first became aware of this problem in 2017, Prince William County was offering alternative meals, and they did have caps on how much debt that a child could have for any given school year. And that meant that kids, we follow this site-based management thing in Prince William County, so it offered the principals some options. You know, they could either extend more credit, or they could give kids alternative meals, and it wasn't mandated by the school board or the county, as a whole, as to how that was going to be handled. So it was school by school, and it was not super easy to track. But now I'm so pleased to report that Prince William County schools do not offer alternative meals anymore.
That's great.
I know, I'm
that
so
is
happy.
Great. And
so
lot,
happy.
I'm sure, in part to you raising awareness on this particular issue.
I'm sure in part, but they also very much are working towards a kinder and more understanding philosophy, I think, in our schools right now. They're really working to make sure that our kids always come first, and that their nutritional needs are considered educational needs. Because the studies are all there. If a kid can't eat, then they're going to behave worse, and they're going to absorb less knowledge, and they're just going to be absent more often because they're hungry, and they're just going to have worse outcomes. So if we want to ensure that our kids become successful adults, and they become really good tax-paying, contributing members of society, which everyone wants, then we really need to just address this very basic need and make sure that every kid gets an equal meal.
Well, and two, it's so tough right now, just the pressures school has on so many of our children. And to have an alternative meal option just is another way to single out children. And I can only imagine the effects of that too. So raising awareness about this issue not only helps a child's nutritional needs, but I would assume would also help a lot of the social aspects as well.
Sure. We don't want to have our schools traumatizing our children. We have kids who are suffering all sorts of things in their personal lives, and school should be a haven where they can go and be safe and have their needs met, and not have anyone taking food out of their hands and throwing it in the trash. And while Prince William County definitely does not do that, other schools in other counties in Virginia do. And so we have counties all over the state that engage in kind of varying levels of policies. Some may have like a $10 or $15 credit limit, and then they give alternative meals. Others may not have alternative meals at all, and oddly enough, it's not required by the federal government that a child be offered a meal at school if they can't pay for it. So if they don't qualify for free and reduced lunch, there's no requirement that says that you have to feed a kid. You can actually just let them go hungry. And
that's appalling.
Is jarring. That is unacceptable in my opinion. And it's absurd. Our country is such a strong and wealthy nation, and we can do better for our kids.
We sure can. So there's not a standard federal policy put in place. And from what it sounds like, there's also not a standardized state policy as well. So what happens in Fairfax County and Loudoun, Prince William, could all be different and could even differ from school to school within those counties as well.
Absolutely. So in other counties, I know in the past, I haven't spoken with Fairfax County in the last year or two, but I know that in the past when I called and asked, they had maybe a 5 free lunch policy. So they would give you 5 credits of lunches, and then after that they gave an alternative meal of like a cheese sandwich and a milk or something, you know, which doesn't have as much protein, doesn't have as much just nutritional value as what you'd hope your child would get. And if they're getting that alternative meal on a regular basis, that's a whole lot of, you know, subpar meals that child is going to be getting at lunch. Not to mention the fact that everyone will see that kid is getting the brown bag instead of the actual tray with, you know, the milk and the vegetables and the fruits and the, you know, the healthy proteins and the dessert too, the treat. You know, there's none of that. So that child is going to be stigmatized and will look different to his peers.
And no fault of his own, right?
Not no fault of the child, certainly. I mean, a child can't earn money and pay for their own meals, so I don't know why we're punishing a child that has absolutely no control over their circumstances.
What it sounds like that we're doing. Now tell us the process of a school debt. At the end of the year, you know, you were talking about earlier that each school has a particular debt. How do those debts typically get paid off? What are those processes that are put in place?
Well, again, it depends on the school, but I can at least say in Prince William County, they will, you know, so you set up an account, you know, online, and you have a cell number and an email, and so you're going to get text messages that says, you know, Tommy owes $2.65 for lunch. Please put, you know, money on his account so that he does not go further in the red. But you're going to keep getting those text messages, and you're going to also get them duplicated in email, and you're also going to get phone calls. The bookkeeper or secretary at the school is going to call, you know, on an occasion and ask if there's a way that they could come in and pay the balance. And so the parents are, you know, informed frequently of this. And I imagine that if you're a family that's struggling, that is already experiencing financial hardship, that this adds an additional strain.
Right.
But many families will put money on as they're able, but it takes a moment to pay it off, and sometimes they just aren't able. So that's where I come in at the end of the school year.
That's great. Well, please stay with us. We're going to continue this important conversation. It's so important, the work that we're doing to make sure that our children can eat nutritious meals. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
I surrender.
All right, pal. Get ready for the day, buddy.
Hey, Dad. Hey, Dad. Do we have a gun?
What's up?
Do we have a gun?
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made this vacation happen.
Double points with every purchase?
Cleverly merging promotions.
Love it.
Cross-referencing travel sites. And booking all your flights with those...
Vouchers. I got us bumped.
They were like, oh. But now they're like... Aloha. You aced this vacation. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
I tried Oxy at a couple of parties. I thought I had it under control. I didn't know it'd be this addictive. I didn't know how far I'd go to get more.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
What to expect when you're expecting.
Like here?
A teenager.
Today, I'm going to show you how to teen-proof your home. First step, hide the car keys. Preferably somewhere they would never look. Challenges will come up. Be ready for them. Hi, honey. Ready for the...
Mom, you don't use mannequins in the mannequin challenge.
You don't have to know it all to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
we're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsey Davis Stover, and we're continuing our conversation this evening with Adelle Settle, who is actually running an incredible organization called Settle the Debt. Thank you, Adelle, again for being with us tonight. And when we finished the last segment, we were talking about how the debt at each one of these schools parents are responsible for. Can you tell us a little bit about what that debt looks like, what the range of debt looks like from school to school? Because obviously it varies from area to area and from school to school.
Absolutely. So Prince William County has a very diverse area. We've got people earning, very little and people earning quite a lot, and it is kind of region by region throughout the county. So in an area where you have a lot of high-income families, you may have no school lunch debt, or you may have just a PTO that is very kind and ensures that they never incur any school lunch debt, because the PTO just takes care of their school lunch debt on a rolling basis. But in areas of the county that have lower income families, you wind up with a lot more school lunch debt. So you can have hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in an elementary school, and for middle and high school, that amount is even higher. So at the end of the school year, last year, we even had some schools that were approaching $20,000 in school lunch debt.
Wow.
Because our high schools are quite large, and those kids eat a lot.
And what does that mean for a school? So as a high school that has to take on a $30,000 debt, what does that mean for the school?
Yeah, so unfortunately in Prince William County, the policy currently is that if a school incurs the lunch debt, that lunch debt needs to be paid off by the school itself. So the principals have to take it out of their budget. So at the end of the school year, there's this amount, and it could vary. It could be a couple $100s, it could be a couple $1,000s, and it's not a set amount that they can really anticipate for sure. And they have to pay that off, because at the end of the school year, all of the food and nutrition budgets have to balance. And so they pay that off, but that means that those principals are making harder choices in terms of, instead of that $5,000 that now is paying off school lunch debt, we could have had a field trip for all the kids, or we could have had, extra computers in the classrooms. Opportunities that children are just not going to have because they had to pay for the school lunch debt.
So our schools that are already scarce in resources, we're just basically adding to that, making them responsible.
Yeah, and it's families too that are shorter in resources as well. So you've got families that are struggling. They may not have the resources to give their children after school activities at the level of higher income families, and we're also then taking away additional opportunities because of the school lunch debt. So it's a complicated problem, but clearly feeding children is absolutely necessary. So I hope and I'm glad that Prince William County makes those choices to ensure that kids get fed. But at the same time, I don't think that we should be allocating more of the burden to schools that are already suffering a higher level of need.
Right, and that's exactly what happens with this policy in place.
Yes.
Well, you have been able to pay off over 30 school debts in Prince William County. I mean, that, for just being an organization for just a short time, that's an incredible thing you've been able to do. What are your goals for 2020?
Well, I'll tell you that 30 school number, that was only in the last 6 weeks too. So I know. So since we became a 501c3, we just asked for donations, and we raised a ton of money, and we raised somewhere around $53,000 in the last 6 weeks of 2019. So we were able to take care of 30 elementary schools and then pay off very large chunks of 3 high schools. And that was really exciting. But we're not done, because Prince William County oftentimes has over $300,000 in school lunch debt at the end of the year. So for spring break, we're going to work towards paying off all of the middle schools throughout the county, because we didn't have an opportunity to help take care of their lunch debts in the last round of fundraising. So we're going to be raising, a lot of money, like $100,000. It's a lot of money to take care of the middle schools. And then at the end of the year, we're going to also work to pay off the entire balance. Every kid that has lunch debt in Prince William County, we're going to try and take care of so that every school has a zeroed out balance, and no principal has to make those hard choices this year.
Well, that's incredible, and I know that you will hit that 2020 goal, because the work you're doing is so important. I have to ask, I've seen pictures on Facebook and your website of handing over those checks to
Yeah.
those schools. What does that feel like?
You know, it feels great. I mean, we love to be silly, and we love to show up at schools with big checks and jump in the air and say, "Hey, your lunch debt is paid off." You know, but it's also just so that we can ensure that our donors and our public and all the people that are supporting us know that their money has a tangible outcome, that that school now doesn't have school lunch debt, and that we're so grateful. So we love to do it. We love that the principals are excited to see us, and the kids are always like, "What are you doing? What's going on?" And they're always so happy. But you know, it's also just to make sure that everyone knows that if you trust us with a donation, that we will make sure that it gets to the hands that needs it the most.
That's fantastic. Well, in this process, I know you have had to partner with schools in Prince William County and work closely with school board members, supervisors, and I'm sure even the state officials in many ways. Talk a little bit about what those partnerships look like and ways in which those partnerships can strengthen to ensure that you can pay off the entire debt.
So I have to say, Delegate Danica Rome has been my biggest supporter since the beginning of this fundraising effort. She has been a steadfast partner, and she has supported me through the entirety, and I'm so grateful to her. And every year she's been introducing new legislation for us, trying to make policies better so that kids aren't shamed in school for not having enough money to pay for their lunches, and to try and get rid of alternative meals across the entire Commonwealth so that the policy is evened up a little, so that no child is going to go hungry in our schools. And so every child gets the same equal meal. And that legislation is pending this year, and I am so hopeful that our legislature does the right thing. Fingers crossed. But I also partner with our supervisors. The Board of County Supervisors have been very helpful. Kenny Boddye has been helpful. Also Margaret Franklin, they're both members of the newly elected board in Prince William County, and they're both very excited to make some positive changes. Ann Wheeler has been very supportive as well. So I'm excited to work with them, and I'm looking forward to making some positive changes. Also, our school board has been wonderful, led by Dr. Latif. He works behind the scenes for me in very kind ways and ensures that there's open communication between me and the the superintendent's office, and just works to make policies kinder and better for everybody. I really appreciate all of their help.
So as you're working with these partners at the state and local level, I mean, ultimately, what would you like to see done in Richmond to take on this issue? And then I'd love to hear what you'd like to see done in Washington to take on this as well.
So in Richmond or in Washington, I think the answer is the same. I think that we need to find a way to make school meals just included as a part of the educational budget. So I believe that if you don't feed a child, then they can't avail themselves of the amazing opportunities that we give our kids in our public schools here in Virginia. We have some strong, amazing, outstanding programs, and I want every single child to have the adequate nutrition that they need to ensure that they can avail themselves of those amazing educational opportunities. So I'd like to see breakfast and lunch just included in the cost of education, and that our local and state and federal government take care of it.
And making sure we do away with alternative lunches.
No alternative meals, no letting a kid go hungry. Every kid gets the same equal healthy meal.
That would be incredible.
That's the dream.
And I think that is too, as you said earlier, I mean, the research shows that children need a nutritious meal to make sure that they can, retain things that they're learning, that they can actively engage and listen in the classroom. And so this really is a part of how we teach our children. And I think there's so many important lessons too, and teaching our children about nutrition, right, that we could make a part of this type of curriculum.
I mean, we could even include, gardens in all of our schools. We could ensure that kids know how food grows and bring it, at a very hyper-local level and make, gardening a normal part of Virginia's education. That'd be great. I would love to see that. But there are a lot of ways to go. Right now we're just kind of focusing in on the local, and then we are going to expand out throughout Northern Virginia. So the hope is that we go from Prince William County to Fairfax to Stafford to Arlington and Alexandria, and just try and encompass, and Fauquier and Loudoun, and just try to wrap into all of the Northern Virginia areas so that all of our kids, until we can solve it in Richmond and in Washington, D.C., are getting a fair and equal breakfast and lunch at school.
Well, that's exciting because I know our viewership is mostly Northern Virginia, while it extends beyond. The bulk of our viewership is Northern Virginia, and to hear that you're going to be expanding, throughout the Northern Virginia area and hopefully throughout the state is really exciting. Absolutely.
That is our hope, and we're excited to do it, and we're looking forward to it, but it's a lot of work. So if any of your viewers happen to want to volunteer, they should really get in touch with me.
Fantastic, absolutely. I think that would be so important for our viewers to understand where they can go to learn more about your organization and to volunteer and to help in any way they can.
Absolutely.
Do you have a presence on social media?
Yeah,
Tell
absolutely.
us about that.
So you can find me on Facebook at Settle the Debt. You can find me on Twitter, also Settle the Debt. I think it's settle_the_debt.
Okay.
Instagram, Settle the Debt. You can email me at adele@settlethedebt.org, and you can find me on our website, which is www.settlethedebt.org.
Fantastic.
But any of those methods, please reach out and communicate. I would love to have some input.
Well, that's great. And I think, too, as our viewers tune into the show and from all different counties, it's important that we all find out what this particular problem looks like in our county, and make sure that we all are doing everything we can to ensure that our students are being fed a healthy meal at school. And I know you'd said earlier that Delegate Danica Rome is carrying legislation in Richmond. Is there any update on what that legislation looks like or the timing of that?
Well, it should be coming forward very soon. I received an email from Delegate Rome's staff saying that it was possible that it was going to start coming up in subcommittee this week. So it's possible that I will be headed down to Richmond to talk about that soon.
That's great. That's exciting too. And something important for our viewers to also note and track is the legislation being passed in Virginia, because while this policy obviously needs to be addressed on a national level, we have seen in the last 2 years, especially this year, Virginia really leading the way.
Absolutely.
And so if we can also lead the way on this particular issue as well, that would be incredible.
It would be. I would be incredibly grateful.
Well, good. So tell us once again your website.
Sure, you can find me at www.settlethedebt.org or on Facebook at Settle the Debt.
Thank you, Adele, so much for being with us this evening. Please stay with us. We have more to come. On our next two segments, we will have Supervisor Kenny Boddye from Prince William County. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
There. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why did the girl ask the mushroom to dance? Because he was a fun guy. What do you call a pig that knows karate? Pork chop. Why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Can I tell you another one? So how does a tissue dance? Put a little boogie on it. What's Beethoven's favorite fruit? Banana. What is a boxer's favorite drink? Fruit punch.
Mom, I got it. What are you doing in there?
I got stuck.
Are you a dog?
I wouldn't do that. Have you seen the pliers? Where'd you find those?
It's not your birthday.
Sorry.
Bye, Grandpa.
Bye, Grandpa.
Take care of yourself.
What are you doing? What are you looking for?
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Good evening. Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsey Davis Stover. And this segment, we have my good friend, Supervisor Kenny Boddye. Kenny, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Lindsey, thank you so much for having me back on your show.
Well, last time you were here, you were a candidate. And I have to say congratulations, because I am so excited to announce you as supervisor tonight.
Thank you so much, Lindsey. I appreciate that.
Well, it is great to have you again. And I know I really want to talk about the important work you're doing at the county level. We just had Adelle Settle on, who runs an incredible organization, Settle the Debt. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of this organization in Prince William County?
Right. Well, first, thank you again so much for having me on the show. And thank you again, Lindsey, for having Adelle. Adelle's been a good friend for quite a few years now. She does a lot of great work in our community. You know, it's one of those situations where we wish organizations like Settle the Debt didn't have to exist, because we wish we could just provide for all the kids in our school system, in our society. But frankly, as a local government, we only have so much pie to hand out in terms of resources. So that's why folks like Adelle and her Settle the Debt are so important, because they're able to pool resources not only from within our community, but from outside to help really push the ball forward in terms of very important things such as student lunch debt.
And I think having her organization really has raised awareness about this issue. I know, several years ago, in fact, people maybe weren't aware that schools were carrying this type of debt, or maybe the families and their neighborhoods and communities, right? We're struggling in this way too. So it seems like the organization really too has raised awareness in Prince William County, and I hope raises awareness all throughout Virginia.
No, absolutely. I think that you brought up a really good point. What happens is far too often folks sort of settle into their own lives. They have some difficulties, but they don't see what's going on outside of theirs. And other folks, they're frankly doing well. So they don't realize that these things are issues. And when they realize they're issues, they may not see how it impacts like the school, for example. So Adelle has done a really good job of not only raising the profile of her own organization, but also the whole lunch shaming crisis in our country, the fact that there's so much food insecurity in our schools and among our low income populations overall. So her organization's done a really, really great job of doing that for all sorts of folks.
It really has. And the story she told about what really sparked her passion for this issue, the NPR story of the child. I mean, it's heartbreaking that it's happening to any child in our country. And it's so important that we ensure we do whatever we can not to continue that in our schools, especially here in Virginia.
Right. I mean, absolutely. We have some of the richest counties in the country. You look at Loudoun, you look at Prince William, you look at Fairfax, Arlington, Alexandria. We have a lot of wealth in these counties, but once you go into your schools, especially your lower income Title I schools, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell that. And so we really need to start to have a much larger conversation, like you said, as a country, as a Commonwealth, especially in Northern Virginia, about how we can do right by everyone as opposed to just those that are already doing well.
Right. I mean, this is an issue. 44% of our children in this country qualify for free or reduced lunch. So it's not an issue that we're just working through here in Virginia or Northern Virginia, it's throughout the entire country. So hopefully we can start the work, the important work and conversations here in Virginia that will expand to other states as well.
Absolutely. And it just also makes you wonder, is it a symptom of a much larger issue, right? Because they're 44%, that's a staggering number.
Staggering.
Almost half of the students and the children in our country qualify for this. Is that a much larger indictment on poverty in our country, on low-income families, on working families, how they have to struggle just to make ends meet, let alone feed their children every day when they go to school or not, basically.
Right. Right. And I know you have been an incredible champion for the work that Settle the Debt is doing. From the county perspective, in terms of budget, what does it mean for these schools that are having to pay off this debt, and situations in which maybe Title I schools have a larger lunchroom debt to pay off, where already in all of our schools resources are scarce? What does that mean for these schools, and ultimately what does it mean for the county budget?
Sure. So as Adelle pointed out in her segment earlier with you, unfortunately it's one of those situations where at the end of the school year, if there is that unpaid debt and the families can't, bring forth that unpaid due, the school has to absorb that, especially in school systems like Prince William County, but other ones as well that are site-based. That budget is that principal's allotment to spend on everything they need for that entire year. So if they then have to use some of that money to absorb lunch debt, that's less money for school supplies, less money for trips for the other kids and throughout the school. That's less money for all the important necessary needs that school has. So then that's just one school. If you multiply that by X number of schools, where you have hundreds of schools in the school system, that has a huge multiplier effect. You're talking about thousands of dollars that aren't going towards the things that people usually associate with, sending their kids to school. Once you multiply that by an entire county, and we allot a certain amount to the school system every year for them to support and educate our kids. That also includes support staff, that includes the educators themselves, that includes school buses, all of these things. So if we're in a situation where a large segment of that money is actually being just peeled away to just deal with basic needs like food, those are resources that we're not even getting into the classroom, let alone making sure that our kids can have a really great and successful, educational experience.
And at the county level, is there any more that can be done to help really take on this particular issue?
I appreciate that question. I have, even before I won this seat, I started to do a lot of research, through my support and collaboration with Adelle and other folks. We started to dig into what could be done. And obviously there's no silver bullet, silver bullet to solve any of these complex issues, but like with anything, you need a short, a medium, and a long-term goal. Our longest-term goal, the ideal, would be to get to a point where on the state and local and federal level, we start to have robust enough funding mechanisms so we don't need to worry about this anymore. That it's just a standard part of school budgets, that they've built this into their programming so no one has to pay for their school lunch anymore.
Right.
That would be the ideal. And other countries do it, other states do it, other school systems do it. We can do it too. We just need to have that kind of bold vision, a real robust conversation with the community, and just frankly get the right decision makers in the right places to make those decisions. That's the ideal. But how do we get there, right? We can't do that overnight.
Right.
So the medium term is, how do we partner with state and local partners to really start to get really creative? Are there grants out there for these kinds of things? Are there programs, federal and state programs, that we're not utilizing enough because we're not doing the right reporting, or we just don't have the right people in the right places doing those grant writings, doing those applications for those things? In the short term, how do we partner with our community groups? I actually this morning had a very good meeting with ACTS. Acts through service in the community. And what they do is they do a lot of work around homelessness and food scarcity and some other things too. But what they've done in the recent years, they've partnered up with some of the schools in our school system, including one in my district, where they provide a food pantry. So food pantries are really great if we have folks that are really able to fund them and actually provide the food. But what they're looking at to expand upon that is having share tables. Unfortunately, policies right now are such that kids just can't share food at the lunch table.
Right.
Now that's an issue. And how do we get around that? Well, if we have just a general population share table where if someone has something spare from their lunch, they put it there. It's not a kid directly giving it to another kid, but it's a free sort of pool for everyone. Kids are able to go get that spare food. Maybe they have a practice or something like that they know they don't have food for. They grab that, they go to their practice, they're good. Well, how can we make it so our schools start to pool those resources too? So you have some schools that they have a lot more. They have kids that are a lot more well off, or their parents are much better at providing that food. And you have other schools where they don't have as much. They might not have as a robust PTO that manages those pantries and those share tables. How can we partner with these groups at the end of the day? Okay, we go to this one school we know always has a lot. We bring it to a school that doesn't have as much. We start to make that equity built into our community partners.
And that's a creative solution, right? And talking about this issue with partners and with other community members. I mean, your bold ideas, right, become creative solutions. And it sounds like these conversations are thriving in Prince William County.
Yes, they are. And then we get into things like, Adele mentioned it, having community gardens for some of these schools, partnering with the cooperative extension, the farming community. All these folks that we know are at the table and would love the opportunity to not only market their own goods, but also partner with these schools to help cultivate the next generation of agriculture workers, farmers, agribusiness, all these things that help our economy and our community in the long run, but also really help the kids have a good nutritional meal every day.
Right. And we talked a little bit too, there's so many lessons that can be surrounded by this effort, right? Whether they're the economic lessons, right, the job building skills, or they're nutritional lessons that, you know, continue to give throughout your life. If you learn, you know, the importance of a healthy meal and you have it available, you know, you're able to really thrive at your highest potential.
Right, absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned the economics, because not only is that an internal economic benefit for that child and their family and those life skills, it's also an economic benefit to our community, frankly, because like with any program, Lindsay, if you invest in prevention, making sure these kids do the right job at school, they're well fed, you're cutting out a lot of costs on the letter end if you don't do those things.
Right.
So if you have hungry kids, they don't perform as well. They end up either falling behind in school, or worse, unfortunately, end up, you know, in trouble at school, suspensions, leaving truancy, getting involved in the school to prison pipeline. Then our economy actually suffers from, because we're having to pay for these kids to have health problems, or they're incarcerated. So no matter how you shake it down, it just makes so much more sense to just do the right thing and make sure these kids are fed.
Right. And it sounds like the leaders are in place, whether it's at the school board level, the county level, or even the state level with Delegate Rome's legislation. They're really in place right now at Prince William County to have these conversations, be bold in the ideas, and come up with creative solutions. Can you talk a little bit about that collaboration right now?
Sure, absolutely. So like you just touched on, we are finally in a place where we have so many like-minded folks that have really looked at this issue and realized how important it is. That we have the school board where they're the front line, right? They see this stuff every day. Their administrators, their teachers see this every day. So they're able to work with county government. How do we get this stuff funded? How do we have these collaborative, strategic, creative partnerships to get there? And then how do we then affect change at the state level to make sure we have the laws, such as Delegate Rome's bill, that makes it so we are doing right by our students and not shaming them anymore. But two, how do we work collaboratively, like I said, that state, federal, local partnership to make sure we're getting all the resources we could possibly do to make sure we're doing the right by our students.
Right. Oh, so important and so exciting, honestly, to hear about the great work going on in Prince William County. Well, please stay with us. Supervisor Kenny Boddye is going to continue to be with us as we learn more about the priorities in Prince William County.
Old man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door and ask for the ball back. Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
You're so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go. See ya. Remember me and your well.
Nice life. Some friends you are.
Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsey Davis Stover. And tonight we're continuing our conversation with Supervisor Kenny Boddye. Kenny, thank you again for being with us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me again, Lindsey. I really appreciate it.
We're actually going to start our segment. We had a caller, Theo from Manassas, would like to know, what are your priorities as supervisor?
Well, Theo, first, thank you so much for your call and for your question. It's interesting because some folks, when they go from running to governing, they get sort of awash with all the priorities, everything that gets thrown their way. And really, it's only been 3 weeks, but I can feel why. It's
Right.
like drinking water from a fire hose. But that said, my priorities have not changed at all from the campaign trail. We looked at the very basic, bare bones, kitchen table issues that affect all Prince William County residents. Schools, number one. We had a good discussion just now about school lunch debt, and that's a really important part. But also, what are we doing for our teachers? Getting that teacher pay raises that we've really been talking about for years. Really looking at infrastructure issues, facilities disparities, things like that. Two, transportation. Would not be a good Northern Virginia elected official without talking about transportation and traffic.
That's right. Yes.
So how are we getting not only better at transporting people during the day to go to work and school appointments, but how are we really connecting our communities better in terms of walkability, bikeability, and really looking at ride share and things like that to really get people out of their cars into other ways of getting to where they need to go. Three, jobs. Over 70%, we talked about this back in the last time, over 70% of the people that work in Prince William County do not work in Prince William County. They work outside the county.
So 70% of people that live in the county go elsewhere for work. I mean, I know we talked about that several months ago when you were on. That is still such a shockingly high number.
Right. And so just think about that. There are so few good living wage jobs in the county, other than maybe the school system, depending on where you are, and the county government itself, that people need to commute outside. So really bring those jobs in so people can live, work, and play in their community. And finally, services. So that's homelessness services, substance abuse, the opioid crisis, mental health, all these wraparound human social services that really help us lift up the most vulnerable among our society.
That's great. And those actually are the issues that you were on the show a couple months ago and championed. And I love to hear they're the same priorities and issues you're championing as an elected official.
Absolutely.
Well, tell us, you've just been at the job, what, roughly 3 weeks now officially, right? Is it what you expected?
For the most part, yes. It's interesting because it feels like it's been a lot longer already than just 3 weeks.
Sure.
You know, we walked into our office January 2nd, the day after New Year's, and it's just been a whole sort of deluge of different things going on. Between, you know, constituents already calling me on the phone. I actually had constituents calling me as early as Thanksgiving of last year after the election, but constituents coming to me with issues, concerns that they have, you know, questions, concerns, issues on their streets, stuff like that. There's also been a very big push by my office to meet with all of our department heads in our county government. I like to build rapport with folks, and some of those folks I had met during the campaign trail, but now that we actually have to work together, I want to make sure I get down, sit in front of them, see what their needs are, their priorities, sort of what their domains are, and really how we can start to move forward on the issues we talked about. The last thing is, frankly, all those events and things that I went to during the campaign, those did not end just because we got elected. I've always been a big believer in still being very involved in our community. And so the other thing is like I go to these events anyway, but now that I'm an elected official, I get invited to even more events. So it's all about prioritizing that versus my actual job, also my day job, because I don't do this to put food on the table. We don't get paid enough on the Board of County Supervisors to do that, but it's all those balancing acts. But for the most part, it's been the drinking water from the fire hose I thought it was going to be.
Good, good. Well, one of the things I was so impressed with on the campaign trail is your desire to continue to make the community a part of your policy making and ensure that people had an equal voice. And I know you are representative of the Occoquan area, but you really want to make sure and hear from all people. And I think that's what I was so impressed with on the campaign trail too, is making sure you take care of all of Prince William County. And so tell us a little bit about what you're doing to ensure that the community continues to stay a part of your policy.
Sure, I appreciate that question, because it's one of those things where once folks get elected and they start to get inside the machine, right? The county government, the state government, the federal government, it becomes very easy to just interact with just the folks that are helping you do that work. Now, those folks are still important. I'm not going to say they're not.
Right.
But we got elected by the people that voted for us, right? We were elected by people that believed in us to be representatives of our community. So I like to make sure that first folks I talk to in any decision and the last folks I talk to are the actual people in my community. So I'll give you a really quick example. Our county is in the middle now of starting to review a strategic plan. Our 5-year plan that outlines our policy goals, you know, where it comes to all the things I talked about, our education system, jobs, economic development, transportation, all those things. But since this is something that this comes from the entire community, I would like to make sure the community is involved at all steps of the process. So I propose to staff that we have a hybrid committee made up of staffers from the county, but also appointees from the county government, from the county board of supervisors. One appointee per supervisor, so it's an even mix of community members and staffers to work in tandem with each other. Wow. We've also talked about, and this was the county staff's decision to start this, but I wanted to expand it, having town halls, maybe every month or so between the beginning of the process to the very end of the year, and basically make sure this is an ongoing conversation. And one of the things I really advocated for is for us to have a wide variety of times and days and ways people can interact. So the very first thing they'll be doing is doing an online survey, very accessible to people. You know, did our last strategic plan work? What was good about it? What wasn't good? What do we need to do better? That kind of stuff. Then having town halls. And what I advocated for is, yes, we should have that evening town hall on during the week at 7:30, because of the point, all those folks that leave the county, they come back. By the time they get back home, it's around 7:30 at night.
That's right.
But we also have weekend town halls. We make them accessible to folks from all throughout the community. We put them in different parts of the district, because my district's a pretty wide district. So we want to make sure that people have ample opportunities to weigh in on these issues. And as always, they're free to reach out to my office as well. We have done a lot to really be accessible as possible, both from an online perspective, you know, through Facebook, through social media, through my email system, but also really making it so our hours are posted online. People call anytime between 9 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock at night during the weekday. They can reach someone at our office. They can email me personally. They can email a member of my staff. We like to be very interactive as an office.
That's great. And you talked a little bit about the budget process. And I know that is, you know, the big thing that you are going to be working on here in the next few months. Is that process, outside of the group of appointees and staff, is that process open to the public? And how are other ways in which the public can get involved in this budget process? Because it's so important, because you're actually deciding where the dollars are going, right? To the schools, to transportation, all of the major issues that affect everyday lives for people in Prince William County.
Sure, that's a great question, because as I always like to say, a budget isn't just numbers on a page or dollars spent. It's a statement of our values as a community, our priorities on where we actually want to move the ball forward in our community. So to me, it's a given that we should make it as an open as a process as possible, because if taxpayers are trusting us to spend their hard-earned taxpayer dollars, one would hope that they would be involved with us in the process and how we decide what we're going to spend that money on. So that's an open process. By our own Board of Supervisors rules of procedure, at least one night during the whole budget season, when it starts around the end of this month until around the end of April, there has to be at least one evening public hearing where the entire meeting is set up just for us to sit there and listen to folks come to us with their concerns, what they believe we should be spending this money on, and what their priorities are and what they think we should be doing with it. Now, I have advocated in our rules procedure to actually change that to make it two. One in the early part of the budget season, one part in the later part of the budget season. Now, there are some legal issues and stuff like that that we have to work through to make sure that that's kosher, because it has to jive with state policy and state law on that. But I would really like to make people aware of the fact that they can always come to any Board of Supervisors meeting that we have public comment time to talk to us about the budget anytime during budget season, but also have more robust public hearing sessions. So people know that, frankly, it isn't just the county, the state or federal budget that actually has a real impact on their lives. If anything, our budget is the one that impacts them every single day. So they should care about it more than any of these other budgets. Really.
Right. And I love that you said our budget is really a statement of our values. And I think that's what's so important. While people may not realize the importance of this time, that statement in itself really encompasses why the budget process is so important. Because it's going to be whether dollars go to education, whether it goes to housing, different services, and it's important that people's voices are heard through this process.
Absolutely.
And I also love everything that you're doing is, in a way, trying to open it up even more, right? Making it more transparent and more accessible to people. And I think you do have the extra challenge of 70% of your residents working outside of the county, and you're really working hard to make sure you can find a time and different ways to communicate with people. I think that's incredibly important.
Right, and I appreciate that, because at the end of the day, what we see a lot of, at least up until this past year, was a little bit of an anomaly. People become very apathetic. They either don't know or they don't think they should care anymore about these issues, because whenever these things are happening, they're at work or they have their busy lives to attend to. Their kids are going to school, they're going to have to go to soccer practices, they're maybe even working 2 or 3 jobs. So they don't necessarily have the bandwidth to then worry about these sort of issues. But to me, those are the folks that we need to hear from the most. Because they're the ones that are in that daily struggle every day just to make ends meet and to have a decent quality of life in our community. So to me, we shouldn't be always catering our public hearings and our community engagement to the folks that the regular 12 or 15 retirees and folks that are able to have the flexible time to make it. We should be making our public hearings and our community engagement to those lowest end sort of engagement folks that need the most help from our budgets and things like that. And the folks we should hear from the most when it comes to the sort of that mean average family that really needs us to care about them the most.
Absolutely. And for our viewers that want to learn more about the work you're doing or also get in touch with you, can you tell us your website and ways in which they can get in touch with you?
Sure, absolutely. So our website, preface this, is still under construction.
Okay.
Our campaign page is still up from before, kennyforsupervisor.com. But if they go to Occoquan District, they just Google search that Occoquan District Supervisor Kenny Boddye. That will be online. They also go to pwcgov.org. There's a link to my specific page. They can find me on there as well. And all of my social media is Kenny Boddye, KENNYBODDYE.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for joining us. Good night.